information on the new prescribed burn association for Siskiyou County. So to jump out from here, we're going to go over to the mountain fire. Mountain fire is not far away at all. Burning here on top of the divide, really between Scott Valley and Shasta Valley. And I'll address comments. See a bunch of comments over there. I'll address those as soon as we're done kind of with the overview briefing. Okay, so Fort Jones, Etna, Callahan, the road to Gazelle. This fire is kind of burning along that road. I'm going to show some more video from Michael Daly. That's Steinberg's name up there, Daly. This video has gotten a lot of play, and it definitely falls into the category of big flames, high drama, but it's worth watching. This is early on. He's driving south on the Gazelle Callahan Road down into the burn, and the rotation of the column here is remarkable. It tells you a lot about the stability of the atmosphere. So he's dropping down here, and I think one thing that's interesting about this video to me, you can see the spot fires out ahead. But one thing I notice in here is that all that black oak. It's interesting. Black oak is one of the most widely spread oaks in California, and it's also a really important food source for people and turkeys and animals. But where you find black oak, you've always had people there. And I think a lot of what we've kind of called fuels management over the years, we could also call oak restoration. People and oak, they've got a really intimate relationship. And a lot of these lands that are tended now that were having these big fires have always been tended by fire, by people. So I'm jumping to give you one other video from him, Michael Daly. So there's some nice stands of timber here. As we mentioned yesterday, as you kind of move farther up into the north of the fire here, a lot of the timberland has just really been cut over the last 100 years. One other thing that's interesting in the area where this fire first got going is that it's kind of in the canyon, and the radiant heat within that canyon, as fire kind of drives itself, or it's burning on both sides of a canyon. You've got the heat of one flank on one side heating the other side, and they kind of can drive each other. So the run of the first part of the fire was kind of wind driven up this draw, and now that the fire has kind of become established on top of the mountain, we don't have that same dynamic of having the ability for the fire to run up slope, and that'll affect really kind of the potential of the fire to make huge runs. But I think coming back to the oak and the pines here is just that this is really what we call east side conditions. When the first time I drove this road, I dropped in and I felt like I was dropping into Eagle Lake or something near Nevada, on the ragged edge, and it made me realize just that effect of the Marble Mountains and everything rising up, it does create this real unique kind of forest here, dry forest, and it's a fire dependent forest. So when we look at the fire history map around here, we just don't have any fire history for a long time. And so then that's what we get is we get these thick overstock forests that just we get fire. We've been so good at putting fire out in here that just on the bad day where there's nothing we can do, then we lose it all. So back to the map of this fire. Here's the Gazelle Callahan Road, and that video that we saw of the big flames was like I driving down into here as this was burning on the first day. So on the first day, the fire kind of followed the road south to north. Yesterday, early in the morning, the fire kind of blew up out of here and became established kind of over the ridge. And it was too smoky most of the day yesterday, so we're looking west here. And then last night, afternoon and evening, the fire kind of made a big push out here to the west. So it's well established in these drainages here. And what happens when it, makes a push like this is that, we probably had dozers. I don't know if there was already line pushed, but there was opportunity here to run dozers up this ridge and pick it up. And then once it slops over like this, then you don't have that opportunity anymore. And it depends on the terrain, but a lot of the time, we aren't going to get a chance necessarily to run dozers on the mid slope to pick up something like this. So just every time we lose a ridge like that, it takes away opportunities for control. So kind of early on a fire like this, we're looking out at where's the next ridge that you can kind of make a stand. It's so sparse out here that buys some advantage, but it also is just so hot and dry that spotting can really drive the fire here. So there's nothing really tidy about the edge of the fire. The fire didn't spread here. We're looking at the north end of the fire now, and it didn't spread a lot on the north end yesterday. It was kind of backing down into this next drainage on the north. But once it gets to this size, you can't always necessarily, these ridge tops are some good dozer ground. That doesn't do us any good when the fire gets down in here. Maybe we'll push a dozer line down through these clear cuts. But once it hits a certain kind of threshold, then there's kind of a popular saying. It's like, don't just go to the next ridge with your thinking. Go to the next ridge where you have time to make a difference, time to implement your strategy. So, if we push this ridge but don't have time to go out and cut snags or get adequately prepped before this gets here, then we've wasted our time. So maybe this road at the bottom is a place that firing will occur. As we've mentioned before, CAL FIRE, one of their biggest charges is to work for the private timber companies and protect private timberland. And so though you may have an opportunity to come down here and light off this road to keep, if the fire becomes well established out in here, no one wants to do that. No one wants to burn up this timber. But when it comes down to it on fires that where we don't have good direct options, firing is what stops big fires. So it's just under the hot and dry conditions we have right now, it's kind of a no-win situation for operations people, because if they keep going direct and they keep getting spotted over, they waste a lot of time and the fire still gets away. If they go indirect and light a firing operation, you're giving up a lot of ground to the fire and you still might lose it. You might light a firing operation on this road here and have the winds carried over, and then not only have you lost all this ground, but you move the fire that much farther forward. So I definitely don't envy the people that have to make the strategies on these big fires. And it's all driven by conditions on the ground. It's really hard for us to look at this and tell you from afar whether or not it's safe to throw a crew down this, or whether or not you can put a dozer on this ridge, or even how much the spotting is going on. But the indices, the weather, is what drives spotting. And we're hot and we're dry, and all it takes is a little wind and some torching, and you've got long-range spotting. Yesterday they had a little bit of opportunity with tankers, and they got in here and they did some pre-treatment on these ridges. And it depends on the fuels how effective the pre-treatment's going to be. If a fire, makes a run up out of here, and you've got some retardant on the ridge, it really depends on the fuel loading and the spotting potential and everything else of whether or not that's going to work. Pre-treating ridges way out from the fire often is kind of just, hey, we only have, this is the only opportunity we have to put some mud on the ground, let's do it. But unless you have time to put in a fire line, it's not a real high probability of success, just pre-treating a ridge. That said, the air tag people are good. They know what they're doing, and they're trying to pick the best plan. They're rarely just painting a ridge for the sake of it. Anyway, that's the mountain fire. We'll keep watching it. We're interested in tactics on this channel, and we want people to understand why things get done the way they get done. There's a lot of talk like, well, if they just went out and put the damn fire out, we wouldn't have to fire off this whole watershed. And it's like, okay, well, we got a bunch of resources on us as fast as we could, and the fire and the conditions define the options. So we'll be watching this and tell you the story of what's happening with it. I'm going to jump out from here and fly north up to the Rum Creek Fire. Once we get up here in Oregon, we've got all these blue polygons turned on. These are fire history of the last 10 years. And also, if you're just kind of joining our rum coverage, we've been covering this fire for about 10 days. It's been a kind of interesting and kind of slow motion affair. This blue to the south is a fire that burned in 2018, Cedar Creek Fire. And we're going to come in here kind of, we're starting to kind of look a little northwest up the Rogue River. The town of Daly is out in here. And so let's look at it north. So what we've got here is black is the area that's been burned. White is the perimeter from the last 2 days. And so where you see white perimeter on the edge of the fire, that means the fire has not moved in 2 days. So this whole southeast flank of the fire is looking really good. No new spread there. The only little spread we've got is kind of up here in the head of, I think it's Steinberg Creek. And there's a little bit of backing fire here in this steep area that we've been watching. Coming around to the north side of the fire, no movement until we get out in this drainage. And we've been watching this drainage for a while just because this is one of those places where the terrain isn't giving firefighters a lot of options for going direct on this steep slope. So we've seen steady growth here every day. Here's yesterday and here's 48 hours previous. This is like one of two areas on the fire that are still active. Okay, so we're looking at the north end of the fire and kind of coming around to like Rainy Falls on the Rogue River, and we've been watching them fire this kind of steep dozer line and hand line here down to Rainy Falls. That's all cooling off. Looks like they've finished the firing there. They've put black line on the map now for this stretch along the Rogue where the fire backed down about 10 days ago. And then we've been watching the fire also kind of burn fairly freely here in the bottom of Rum Creek. And just kind of doing the kind of same fire behavior we've been seeing in like the Six Rivers, and on this fire also just this slow, steady kind of backing and flanking in really steep ground where there's not great control options. So coming around to look at just kind of the northwest quarter of this fire, which has been the kind of interesting part now for a while. We started talking, over a week ago about their options for controlling this part of the fire. Turn on my roads here. There's this mid-slope road through here, and early on we wondered if that might be a place that we could control the fire, and there's a couple spots it worked, and then there's some spots where it didn't. So kind of early on we saw those old dozer lines and we thought they're probably going to do an indirect line. So that's kind of what they've been doing here in Rum Creek is they pushed a dozer line out this major ridge system, and they've been firing this over the past week, and they're making progress here. And what we've been talking about, they got hand line down the river out here, probably from a previous fire. You can see this area here burned, in the last 15 years or so. So they're just taking their time, getting depth, and burning out of here. And their main thing, kind of scheduling wise on this, is just that they have to keep ahead of the fire in Rum Creek. This fire, as it's been burning, they need to get depth out here before it can make slope-driven runs. Anyway, that's kind of Rum Creek for you. It's one of those, watching a lot of this stuff, it's kind of slow motion, and that's just tactics of trying to keep ahead of the fire, trying to get enough depth to your line, so if something blows up out in here, you're ahead of it, and also trying to put fire on the ground in a sensible way that creates good outcomes, good fire effects. Trying to get as much depth as you can without nuking things. And we've made a lot of progress on that in the last 30 or 40 years of firefighters and ops people starting to think about the consequences of their firing operations. A lot of that's been driven by public pressure. In the 1980s around Hayfork, there were some backfires that were just lit at the bottom of the hill, and that caused huge patches of high severity fire. And so if you think about it, like if we just came down here, if we built a fire line down this ridge, dragged fire down it, and then just came and lit the bottom of this hill, yeah, we would contain the fire. We would have black, and the fire would be safely contained, but we'd kill all the trees on that slope. So in Hayfork in the 80s, in the Klamath, there were places where firing got done from the bottom of the hill, killed all the trees, and then there were big salvage sales of old growth, and people saying like, hey, like people must be on the take here if they like did this. Does their buddy own a timber company? There was a lot of backlash to that, and even in the Klamath in 2008, when we had big fires there was a lot of firing there that the locals were concerned caused a lot of the high severity fire. And so talking to some veteran firefighters, they'll tell you like, I learned a lot with prescribed burning that I use on wildfires. If we're going to fire this out, can we make our way down? Can we use drones or get crews out here and put some fire on the ground to back it down like we would with the prescribed fire? And so it's, I think it's good to remember that the people that know the most about firing, the hotshot crews and the people that do it all the time, they have a lot to teach us about firing on prescribed burns, and there's a lot of potential crossover. As we train a more and more agile prescribed burning workforce, we're going to have more and more talented people that know how to use fire tactically. That's going to make us all better firefighters. Last thing I want to jump to here is Cedar Creek Fire. That's Rum Creek. If you're up there and you're evacuated or worried about it, hopefully our information is helping you kind of understand what's going on, why it's taking so long. And the firefighters here have had a lot of hard work that they've done under really hot, dry conditions, and outcomes so far look pretty good. All right. Hey, there's a fire up there. So we're going to come up here, Cedar Creek Fire. This is burning in an area I don't really know very well, Waldo Lake Wilderness. This fire's been burning for a while. Sorry, I'm having trouble flying here. So just kind of give you the big picture. Here's Oak Ridge. Here's Bend. Crescent Lake. Chenault would be over here. Vida, Nimrod, kind of the McKenzie River corridor out in here. So this is burning in a pretty remote area, and it's been burning for like a month or something. But it made a big run in the last couple of days. We're kind of doubled in size. And I don't really know much about what's happening on this fire. I just want to show you the mapping. We can do a little more research into it. But it kind of, over the past month or so, burned out this way, and now here's this white line. Shows where it was a couple days, 2 days ago, and this is all new spread. This is one of those fires where it's kind of right off the bat contained by lava and lake on portions of it, but the concern on this fire is just that we're into the east wind season now, and we've got all this land out here to the west that didn't burn in recent fires. So Holiday Farm Fire in 2020 started here and ran like 20 miles in one big kind of wind event evening, devastated communities all along the McKenzie River. So it's concerning to have a big fire hanging out up here with so much out to the west of it going into east wind season. So I'm kind of uninformed as to what the tactics are and what's going on in this fire, but we're going to do a little research on it, and we'll have a little bit more to tell you about it. I wanted to talk a little bit about this fire up here, the Holiday Farm Fire. Just all those fires in 2020 were driven by one big east wind event. You can see this fire here, Beachy Creek Fire, Holiday Farm Fire, the Riverside Fire, and the something else Creek Fire. major landscape scale events. And one thing we really saw in those fires was that they just devastated a ton of commercial timberland, where the fire just ran through all these young stands. And so Oregon's kind of having a reckoning with wildfire. The west side of Oregon, we've, I think, gotten used to thinking of it being wet and a place that we don't have big fires. And then we've just seen huge losses in the timberland there. And I think it's just like California, it's forcing this reckoning in forestry of can you really get away with growing a crop that takes 40 or 50 years in a place that might have a fire every 15 to 20 years. So that's something we're going to be covering here coming up in the next month or so on the lookout, is just looking at how the forestry industry is adapting to climate change and adapting to new fire realities. Anyway, that's the Cedar Creek Fire. We're going to wrap it up here. I'll start taking some questions. A lot of comments. Hey, folks. Someone says, if my home had burned, I'd want to know right away. This is good info to share. Do I have any wind predictions for the Rum Creek Fire? I don't. I like the windy.com website. I use that quite a bit. Someone says, I'd rather see what's going on no matter what. And when I hear about my property, someone has to tell you at some time. Not knowing was worse. Knowing it's gone is just part of moving forward. Thanks, Gail. B. Bloom wants to know something about containment. What does it mean? Containment is what firefighters put on the map when they feel like they could walk away from the fire and just leave it. So, you can have a section of fire line that's cold, but if there's still snags that have, that are smoldering, or if there's, material up the hill that could roll down and cross the line, you don't really call something contained until you're ready to stop staffing it and patrolling it. So it takes a long time to show stuff as contained. It's kind of also, it's like the kind of, what day are we going home? So if you have a team that's on a fire and they think that they're going to be there another week and they're 50% containment, they might just like increase containment 7% a day. Looking out, like they know that it's going to take them a week to do their paperwork and have their public meetings and everything else. And so they'll sometimes just kind of prorate it, hey, we're going to be here another week, even if the fire is kind of already out. So it's, I've been on fires that were completely out, but they're saying it's 20% contained just because they know they need to stay there and kind of wrap things up, clean up all the hose. When you say a fire is contained, you lose a lot of your resources. And so sometimes with containment, people play games, like we're going into this crazy heat wave in Northern California, and maybe we'll pop some fires in Southern California. And Northern California, they might not want to give up a lot of their resources. So we might say that there's a big fire. We might just say, hey, let's not call it contained until after the weekend because we want to keep these resources here. So games get played with it. It's a political number. Sometimes the fire is out. Generally, a Cal Fire fire, if they say it's 30% contained, in grass and brush, it means it's out. And they're just mopping it up. Lots of games get played. It's a political number. All right. There's a fire labeled in Wairika. I don't know anything about it. Someone says that Siskiyou County Library has a series of books about the small towns in the county and history and interviews and a lot of stuff about fires. Goose Nest Fire was a big one. Day 3 and InstaWeb doesn't have a Miller Mountain Fire on their web page. These fires are being run by CAL FIRE, so your best bet is to go to the CAL FIRE website. They don't, CAL FIRE fires do end up on InstaWeb, but InstaWeb is kind of more used by the feds. So I would check out the CAL FIRE stuff. It does take time for the public info people to get up and running. These teams, from all over the state. So you bring in a team from a CAL FIRE team, and there's people rolling from San Diego, driving 12 hours or more to get here. So, and as we've seen, it takes a while for the CAL FIRE and agency public information machine to get rolling. And then once they do get rolling, if you've got a press release or something that you want to put out there, like it's got to go to Sacramento and be approved by headquarters, basically. So that's why it takes a long time for the public info people to get out info, and then everything's so political, especially when structures burn. People are just super careful and delicate about what they say. So it's just them. That's them trying to I don't envy the agency public information officers having to navigate all the politics and protocol and everything else they have to. It makes their job almost impossible to share good, timely information. Someone says, how did the fire erupt off the side of the highway? Spontaneous ignition. It's all suspicious, when a fire starts right by a road. It could just be something, trailer chains or something else, but and we don't really get into speculating here on fire causes. All right. That's about all we got right now. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for supporting the Lookout. We're supported by you, the viewers. So if you like our stuff and want to help support it, go to the-lookout.org, and you can become a subscriber there. You can read our other stuff and keep on top of what we're doing. It helps pay for things like me going out and interviewing people and spending time editing and everything else. Thanks for joining us. And if you're evacuated, good luck. Hope you get to go home soon.